Starry promise. The night sky stretched above Hogwarts like a vast canvas adorned with diamonds. The stars twinkled gently in the deep blue expanse, their reflections shimmering on the surface of the black lake. In the distance, the soft hooting of an owl echoed, mingling with the rustling of leaves in the cool autumn breeze. At the top of the Astronomy Tower, Hermione Granger stood wrapped in her dark blue cloak. Her arms were crossed over her chest, and her fingers absent-mindedly grasped the fabric of her sleeve. She wasn't sure why she had come here again. Perhaps it was the silence, perhaps the memories, or perhaps it was him. It was strange. All summer she had thought that after the war, everything would return to normal. But it hadn't. Things had changed. Relationships had shifted. And some emotions, ones that had once seemed so clear, had blurred into something she never wanted to admit. And then there was Harry. They had been friends for so many years. They had been through hell together. But now, in the calm after the storm, she realized how differently she saw him, how differently she felt when he laughed, how much she missed him when he wasn't around, how her heart pounded whenever he touched her, even the slightest brush of his fingers. And that was why she ran here, to the only place where she could be alone with her thoughts. The door to the tower creaked open softly, and Hermione's breath hitched. "I knew I'd find you here," came a quiet, familiar voice. "Harry." She didn't answer right away. Her heart was beating faster than she would have liked. "Am I that predictable?" she finally asked, turning to look at him. Harry stood there in his black cloak, the fabric billowing slightly in the wind, his perpetually messy hair ruffled in the night breeze, and the emerald green of his eyes glowed faintly even in the dim light. He smiled. "Number, but I'll always find you." With those words, he stepped closer and leaned against the stone railing beside her. Their shoulders nearly touched. Hermione noticed the way he looked at her, not like he used to. Not as a friend. There was a new kind of intensity in his gaze, a quiet tension that sent warmth pooling in her stomach. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sky. The wind whispered around them, sending a chill through the air. But the presence of the other was strangely comforting. "Do you remember when we were up here in third year?" Harry asked suddenly. Hermione chuckled softly. "Of course. Rescuing Buckbeak and Sirius. And the Time Turner. We never stopped to actually look at the stars back then," he murmured. Hermione sighed. "We never really had time for anything." Harry turned his head toward her. "That's why I'm here now." Hermione frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Harry straightened, moving to stand directly in front of her. His gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I thought, after the war, everything would go back to normal," he said slowly. "But it didn't. Because normal doesn't exist for me anymore. Everything changed. I changed. And for the longest time, I didn't understand why." Hermione barely dared to breathe. Harry lifted a hand and gently tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm despite the cold night, and even that light touch sent shivers down her spine. "And then I realized," he continued, voice barely above a whisper, "everything changed because of you." Hermione's throat tightened. She had always been the one with the answers, always the one who knew what to say. But not now. Harry took another step closer, his breath mingling with hers in the crisp air. You're the reason I keep searching for something more, he murmured. Hermione couldn't look away from his eyes. They were so open, so vulnerable, filled with a quiet plea, a hope that she wouldn't turn away, that she wouldn't break what had been slowly building between them. But she didn't want to break it. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she lifted her hand and pressed her palm against his cheek. She could feel the warmth of his skin, the faint heartbeat beneath her fingers. Harry, just his name. And yet, it held everything. Harry leaned in, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she closed her eyes, and in the next heartbeat, their lips met. At first, it was soft, tentative, like the whisper of a breeze. But then, as her fingers tangled in his hair and his arms wrapped around her waist, the kiss deepened. It was magic, stronger than any spell. It felt like finally coming home. When they pulled away, both slightly breathless, a small smile played on Hermione's lips. "You're my reason too," she whispered. Harry looked at her as if she had just given him the greatest gift in the world. And then he kissed her again. Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever before. And in that moment, under the vast night sky, their starry promise was sealed.